Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to Rationable. Today, we have a very, very special guest who I'm interviewing today, and that is Seth Andrews from the Thinking Atheist podcast. Now, I started my journey into atheism back around 2010. I think I've told you guys about it in different occasions. I'll go more in depth into it in a dedicated video if you want. But Seth's podcast was one of the first that I started listening to that really kind of had a really nice approach to it. It was very down to earth. It was very real, very human. It didn't have any fancy philosophy things like Matt Dillahunty throws up or anything of the sort. We love that too. And hopefully I'll have him on the show at some point as well. But Seth had a very nice, approachable kind of voice. And he had very real, human, down to earth conversations with a lot of people. And his ideas were very relatable. There were some very powerful ones, like especially dealing with grief without God was one of the episodes that kind of stuck out. And of course, every Halloween, he has a Ghost Stories episode, which is amazingly entertaining. And I make sure I watch it during the day or listen to it during the day because sometimes they're really powerful stuff. But Seth, thank you so much for joining us on Rationable. It's such a pleasure to have you. How have you been doing?
I'm well. It's an honor to be here. No, we're doing well. At the time you and I are speaking, we've had a winter storm here in Oklahoma, which is rare for us. And so there's ice all over the roads. The dogs refuse to go outside. So, by the way, speaking of the dogs, at any moment, well, actually, at some point, there may be a doorbell that rings and my little dogs are going to lose their minds and go and try to attack somebody at the ankles, and I'll have to go and answer if that happens, my apologies in advance. But no, life is good. Things are good. And it's an honor to be here. Thanks for the invite.
It's totally our pleasure. And I really wanted to kind of get into the weeds of your journey, even though we've heard about it many times on the podcast. But I'm sure that on the Indian side of things here, people who might be watching who might not have heard about your podcast. Of course, I've heard about your conversion story, and there's a book that you've released called Deconverted. You've been a radio professional and a media professional for most of your life. What was that catalyst that kind of drove you into starting the Thinking Atheist podcast in the first place?
The Thinking Atheist is an icon, and I always like to make sure people know that. It's not a person. It's certainly not me. I'm not a great thinker. I'm just an everyman. But coming out of fundamental Christianity, a literal Bible, my parents were hardcore Christians. Adam and Eve were real, and they lived in the garden, and the snake spoke to them. And Noah built an ark, and Jesus arrived and was born of a virgin, blah, blah, blah. And that was my normal. I just never really did my own thinking about any of it. I was so thankful I was born into the right religion at the right time. How lucky me, fortunate me, And I was, a student leader, and I was kind of a crusader. I guess that's my personality. I just want to go out there and stir the pot and be a part of things and change the world. And I was a young man of great confidence, so much confidence that it bordered on arrogance. I simply wasn't curious to know about many of the things that I had learned to ridicule. Atheists were evil. Evolution was a lie of the devil. Science and scientists were all in collusion to try to make us a godless society. But it's funny, as you get older, I think sometimes you become less interested in keeping other people comfortable. You're not as interested in fitting in. You don't have quite as much patience with all the BS. For me, as I approached midlife, this whole idea that I need to go along to get along, I just became more and more dissatisfied. And under the surface, there had been some things that happened that just didn't make any sense. It just doesn't wash. I can't reconcile this. And at the age of 37, I finally said, I'm going to figure this out. I'm sick and tired of sitting on my hands. I'm going to go back. I'm going to read the Bible. I'm going to get into a lot of the stuff that I've been warned is a lie of the devil. I'm going to find out for myself. And man, my whole life opened up. It was It was hard. It was a very difficult journey. If you're asking me about specifics, forgive the long answer, my friend.
Yeah.
There was the death of a popular Christian recording artist in the 90s, 1997. Rich Mullins was his name, horribly killed in a car accident. I remember being on the radio telling everybody that God had called him home, and it just made no sense. I was on the radio, and in my skull, I was thinking, this is a bunch of crap. This doesn't wash. 9/11 was big for me, as everybody's invoking the name of God, and people were asking me, the Christian, to pray for our nation, pray for God's hedge of protection. And a lot of people were blaming gay people or atheist, secular, humanist, Muslims. I don't know. They were blaming everybody. And that and a whole bunch of small things. So I was doing a ton of work. I used to be a video producer after I was an FM radio broadcaster. I went into video production, and most of our clients were churches. So I was traveling all around the country. And it's funny because you'd go into a church and you'd see the culture, you'd meet the people, you'd hear their specific doctrine, you'd meet their pastors. And I think it became kind of a social experiment where I thought, wait, so much of this is just man-made. Finally, all the dominoes fell. And it was around 2008 that I just said, I don't buy it. And then I created an online community and a channel to help me hopefully be a beneficial part of that conversation to maybe help other people who were going through the same thing.
So this was around when you were about 30 years old, was it?
I was about 37 when I got really serious. I was working and I stumbled across Christopher Hitchens' debate video. I think this was early 2008, I think. And he was debating a rabbi. And I was just, I was doing some mindless graphic work. And so I watched this video. And after 90 minutes, I was struck by the fact that it was the atheist who made the most sense. Wait a minute, that's not supposed to happen. I'm not Jewish. It's not like the rabbi was my, particular, cup of tea, but certainly he could defend God. And instead it was the heathen, the godless man who made the most sense. I just rattled. And before I knew it, I started to click other videos, and then I bought books, and then I read articles, and I watched more debates. And man, that unleashed the whirlwind. It just changed everything for me.
Yeah, it's a very familiar story. The thing is, I've been very fortunate to not really have been brought up, indoctrinated in any particular religion. My parents have been from the Brahmo Samaj, which is a reformist Hindu sect. It's actually it's closer to Western religion than the Abrahamic religions than it is to Hinduism in many ways. Like, it's actually, the founder had actually read the Bible in the original Aramaic, and he read the Quran in Arabic, and he'd read the Torah, and he'd pulled some good stuff from all angles and put together not really a monotheistic ideology, but more like a pantheistic idea where everything, like God is everything, God is life. So as unfalsifiable as anything else, but relatively more realistic. Like if there's a religious ideology.
Doesn't Hinduism have like thousands of gods?
Exactly. We do. They do, I guess I could say.
Is there a hell or a like damnation, that kind of thing, a heaven and hell in Hinduism? Forgive my ignorance, but
no, it's actually, there is a hell in Hinduism, but it's more like the underworld, like in the Greek mythology. But the main engine of the moral fabric, which I'm still trying to unravel here because it's very confusing, because we have so many different books, and we have epics, and we have all sorts of other things coming together, all claiming to be prime books of the religion. But so there's a lot of stuff to kind of parse out. But one of the main engines of this is karma. So it is the good deeds that you do in life that determine whether you get reincarnated into something else or someone else, or you get freed from it and achieve nirvana and moksha, which is the freedom from the cycle of reincarnation, which is what everybody strives to achieve and probably fails at it, because then you get reincarnated as somebody else, an animal, a person. If you have bad karma, you'll get reincarnated as somebody from a lower caste or somebody who's really underprivileged, has no money, is living on the street side. So you can see how this starts getting very problematic when you start digging into it and kind of starting to see that when you see like underprivileged people and poor people who we have a lot of, you start justifying it as they must have done something wrong in the previous life. And that is how people's minds automatically work. So this is something that you are extremely well read in the Christian religion. You've read the Bible. You know all the passages. Me, on the other hand, I don't even know where to start. So because we've got multiple books and multiple interpretations of every single passage. So as an atheist podcaster in India, Vimo has mentioned, Hinduism is very slippery. As soon as you debunk one thing, somebody says, "Oh, I don't believe that at all." Like, I believe this. Now try and debunk that. So it gets very uneasy. But around the same time, when I was about 30 years old, I started questioning the things that I believed in. And on my side, it was ancient technology and ancient archaeology, ancient civilizations who were apparently extremely technologically evolved. So we have, of course, the legends of Ramayana and Mahabharata, where you have flying chariots and you have exploding arrows and all sorts of fantastic stuff. And I thought, whoa, they had missiles, they had planes, they're just calling it in poetic terms. And because that's what we were entertained with on Sunday mornings, like Sunday morning entertainment was all these epics, like televised versions of these. So I kind of grew up believing that. But then when these kind of things started, when I had to start writing a dissertation for my university, which was supposed to be a science fiction novel, I thought it was going to be, we'd go to a different planet and you find humans because ancient technology, and humans built a spaceship and they moved to a different planet because something was going to happen and a calamity happened and all of civilization was lost. But then first contact is with other humans, that kind of thing. And then I found out that all of this was crap and that there was not a shred of evidence for any of it. So then my worldview from that perspective started crumbling. So I stumbled onto your podcast. I stumbled onto Skeptoid and the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. And I started more along the non-religious, but more skeptical, critical thinking path, because I never had a beef with Hinduism at least. And that is a pun that the Indians will get because they're not supposed to eat beef. But what is that catalyst that finally made you think that, I've got to get this message out there. Like, I've got to tell people about my story and tell them what I found and to start that podcast? What is that final catalyst that flipped that switch?
Well, there are a few gears in that machine. I think back in 2009, which is when the website launched, there weren't nearly as many resources for people like me. Now you'll find a lot. There are YouTube channels, and podcasting has exploded. And I also think that the whole idea of atheism has become a little bit more normalized in most of the culture here in the United States. It's not quite as scandalous as it was, and still kind of is, but not like it was back in the day. But I live in an extremely religious part of the United States. The state of Oklahoma I could throw a rock out my window and hit 3 churches, right? I call my town Jesus Town. Yeah. It is such a Jesus-y area. And I felt alone. I think the main reason most people stay in religions and don't, even if they're biblically illiterate, they'll stay in a Christian church, is really a sense of belonging and community. And if you leave that, you really feel like you're twisting in the wind. Is there anybody else out there who gets me? How many people are judging me? And I had people in my own family, they lost their minds. You are going through a midlife crisis. It's an attack of Satan. You are just living in sin. Anything but, hey, maybe Seth has a point that it's stupid to believe that donkeys could speak Hebrew in the book of Genesis, right?
Yeah.
And, I was partially seeking a sense of belonging and community, partially wanting to help create that for other people, especially back in 2009. And again, I'm an activist by nature. I was on stage as a high school student for Jesus. I was talking on stage. I was a spokesperson for a youth organization called Youth for Christ. I started as an FM radio broadcaster in 1990. I was used to being on the front. I was out there. I was kind of a ham. It's weird. I'm introverted in many key ways, but I love people, and I'm good on stage. It's a weird combination of, but then I also retreat to a dark room and recharge my battery, and I'm like, everybody leave me alone. I'm that way. But I think I was mad. I felt like I'd wasted so much time. I was irritated that nobody seemed to be listening to my concerns. In my naivety, I thought to myself, well, if I talk to all my believing friends about the stuff I've just discovered over the last year, it'll blow their minds. So I would go in and I would be like, have you read this? Have you seen the contradictions here? What about this verse? And this doesn't make any sense. And this has been scientifically disproven. And holy cow, there was an echo of this in a previous religious text. So this has obviously been, and I would go in, and not only would I have no luck, no success, but my interlocutor would actually double down and say, well, now I doubly believe and you're doubly wrong. And I felt like I need to get this out. It was part of my own process. Maybe that's the best way to say it. My early work was a lot more naive. Honestly, I should have just shut up for a few years and been a sponge and learned and listened. But instead, I just wanted to get out there. So I made a lot of bad arguments. I was pretty angry. Not just the time wasted, but the way I was being treated by believers, like the broken thing. And after a few years, I kind of calmed down. I started to just center myself. And I find this is the case with a lot of people, a lot of apostates. When they come out, they think, I have believed nonsense. I have wasted time. Everybody's treating me like I'm the problem for doubting. And you just get angry. And that goes on sometimes for years. But for most people, I think that begins to subside. And then you start to balance yourself out a little bit. And it took me some time, but I got there. And now, I have my moments of anger. I can get snarky. Yeah. I can go for the jugular. I can do that. But I really have become more interested in de-escalation. Yeah. Let's not attack each other. And I'm tired of the drama and the bickering and the awfulness. And is there a way where we can maybe start with a softer voice in good faith and try to approach each other first as human beings? It's not always possible, but I think that's been a goal in my own life.
Yeah, that's something that I've always kind of gravitated towards. So when I read that book, The Manual for Creating Atheists by Peter Boghossian, the cover is very different from the actual contents. And I quite related to that approach. And then I watched Anthony Magnabosco actually practicing that on the streets. I almost met him. I was at the FFRF conference in San Antonio, Texas. And he was there, but I missed it. But he's been
Anthony Magnabosco he's a gem. He's lovely,
wonderful
lovely person.
And I'm going to have him on as well at some point.
And there may be a few people who may have no idea what we're talking about, but the book, A Manual for Creating Atheist, was actually promoting something that has come to be called street epistemology. Epistemology means, how do we know what we know? How do we come to knowledge? And street epistemology would have people engage other people in good faith using questions, the Socratic method. So instead of saying, you're wrong, this is stupid, you say, well, how did you come to that knowledge? And why do you believe that? Can you tell me more about it? And what would you think about this? And so you lead with questions, which helps keep people off the defensive. And I've incorporated a lot of street epistemology in my own journey. It's funny. And sometimes I can get a little snarky. It's like you're at a party.
We all get to do that, right? He's like, no, but you're wrong.
Religious people. And they're, before you know it, they'll say something that they heard on Fox News, which is a wildly conservative, highly religious nightmare of a media group in town. And they'll talk about how we need to have the 10 commandments on display in our courtrooms, which is something that we have in the United States. They put the biblical 10 commandments on the wall in our secular courts. It's so frustrating. So I'll say, well, you feel like those should be on display? Yes, I think that's yes. Well, why? Why do you think? They're important. They're the most important rules ever given to us by God. They're the 10 commandments. And then I'll reach in. I shouldn't do this. I'll reach into my wallet and I'll pull out whatever I have in my wallet, $20-$40. And I'll put it on the table. And I'll say, I will pay you $40 if in 1 minute you can name 7 of the 10 commandments. Ooh. I haven't had anybody. I've done it 6 times. Not one person. Not one person has been able. And, it doesn't necessarily achieve a great result, but I'm trying to prove a point. And exactly. That is, you don't know what it is, but we have to have it posted in every courtroom in the United States. It's so freaking frustrating. So I'm sorry to take that detour, that bunny trail.
No, that's very important. Like
stream of consciousness there. So
in India, like every single news channel, almost every single news channel is like Fox News. The different degrees of Fox News, of going absolute batshit crazy to relatively reasonably, but still very conservative and biased. So that entire panorama is covered in most of the Indian news channels. It's absolute madness. So I totally relate to that. And I have a rather annoying habit of waking up the first thing in the morning. I watch is Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert. And my wife is like, "Oh, turn that off. I'm getting a headache." But that's what
you take the temperature of whatever insanity has been going on this side of the planet. I fear for this country. I
know. I have a kind of Schadenfreude kind of thing about, watching the politicians in the US do all such horrendous things. But at the same time, it's I realize it's very real. Like when Trump was getting elected, I remember I was sitting in a pub and there were a bunch of people. We were just kind of talking about, I was like, Trump's going to be an absolute disaster. Why on earth is he even being able to stand for elections? Like, this is ridiculous. Like, who does that? And then those guys from another table said, "Oh, this is going to be fun. We just want to see what happens." I'm like, dude, this is not only an entire country that is going to be subjected to his nonsense for 4 years, but as a consequence, every country in the world will also have to deal with it, because the US has a very privileged position of having a lot of power over a lot of other countries. And like, it's not going to be fun for anyone. We loved watching all the comedy. But
Trump, I believe it was today or yesterday on Truth Social, had I don't know what you call it, retruthed, whatever he calls it on his social media platform. But he had shared a comment by someone who threatened physical violence if the MAGA conservatives don't get what they want, if Trump is not reelected. He actually said something like physical violence, physical force, war in the streets. And there is a growing concern that we're going to see more and more and more of that. We have more firearms than citizens in this country. We have gun culture. We have an entire culture of Christian jihadists who are calling for holy war because they believe that everybody who's not them is the devil. We have QAnon conspiracists who are spreading crazy lies about everything from child trafficking and Democrat pedophilia to drinking children's blood, and all that, just crazy stuff. This is the end of the world. The Antichrist is coming, and I am waiting with fear and trepidation for the day that some catalyst, whether it's Trump actually saying, take to the streets with your guns and take this country back, or whatever is going to happen. I have a lot of fear that we're going to see a literal civil war in the United States, probably maybe this year. I don't know.
I hope not. But haven't you been tempted to make those, you had those little videos that you had on your YouTube channel? You gotta be shitting me. I love those. Those are hilarious.
I used to do a lot more video production. It's funny. I started out on the Thinking Atheist page as a video producer who occasionally did podcasts. And then it transitioned. I became a podcaster who occasionally does videos. But a lot of the early videos, they were fun to do, but I was spending weeks at a time on 1 4-minute release. And I just came to the point when I just could not sustain it. But I kind of wish I could, I think about, well, one day would I be able to subcontract out? I could write it and have graphic artists and we could work and produce. But right now I'm busy doing so many things. I'm preparing for a speaking tour in the spring, going to Wichita, Orlando. I'll be in Phoenix for American Atheist. I've got a second podcast I just released. And so I've just been flying.
What's the idea about?
It's just a new endeavor to help keep things fresh. I've been doing the Thinking Atheist for 14 years, and you can only debunk the book of Genesis so many times. And I still love what I do, and I love my community, and I'm so honored to be a part of it. And I will continue on. But I wanted a fresh challenge. And how do I make this a short story? I will make this a short story.
Go for it.
There was a world-renowned broadcaster storyteller named Paul Harvey. And every weekday, he used to release like a 4-minute true story. He called it the rest of the story. And people would stop their day. It was so good. They would stop whatever they were doing and they would listen to the whole thing. It was huge. And he'd tell this tale about something that could be something that happened 100 years ago, or it could have been last month. It could be weird news or celebrity trivia, true crime. Who knows what it was going to be, but it was true. And at the end, he'd kind of pull the rug out from underneath you and give you a piece of information that was a surprise. And you'd go, oh my gosh, I had no idea. And he passed away in 2007, and nobody is doing his show the way he did it. I looked everywhere, and I decided, well, I can carry that torch. I'm not going to be Paul Harvey. I've got my own vocal style. I've got my own storytelling style. I'm me. So it's definitely my show. But it's inspired by him. His ghost is all over it. They're 5-minute vignettes where you just jump into a real thing that happened. And at the end, you kick them a little bit and people feel like they really went somewhere. So it's called True Stories with Seth Andrews. If you're interested, the website is truestoriespodcast.com. You can just subscribe on, pretty much any app, but they're fun. They're fun stories.
Yeah, it sounds like amazing fun.
Really is. It's like, I just wrote a story that's going to release. I'll just spill the beans for you about a young girl, first grader in school, and she couldn't hold still. And the teachers were monumentally frustrated. She was bounce around. She couldn't, she was always distracted, and they thought she had a learning disability. And so they told her parents, we think she may have a problem. You need to go to a learning and behavioral specialist for children. And so the mother took her daughter to the specialist, and the specialist interviewed everybody and asked all the questions. And then he asked the mother to leave with him, and they left the little girl alone in his office, and he turned on a radio. And as that door closed and they were looking through the glass, the little girl, all of a sudden, as soon as that door closed, jumped up and bounced around the room and jumped on the desk and started dancing and carrying on. And she was just very physical. And the specialist looked at the mother and said, there's nothing wrong with your child. She is a born dancer. This is how she expresses herself. You need to provide an outlet for that. And the mother immediately enrolled that girl in dance school. And she went on to join the Royal Ballet and ultimately became the woman who choreographed Cats and Phantom of the Opera.
Wow.
Such a good story. And that's the kind of stuff that I get to release 3 times a week on True Stories. It's a lot of fun.
That's fascinating. I'm definitely going to give that a shot. And amongst all the skeptic podcasts and everything that I've been
it's hard to keep. I think it's hard for content creators to keep up with other people's stuff too. People are always asking me, well, what do you like to listen to? And I'm like, oh God, I try to listen to and watch other stuff, but when you're making things, it's so hard to carve out time.
Absolutely. I've got a whole bunch of audiobooks sitting around,
Yeah.
including Deconverted. And I think you came up with, you've just released a new book, which
Yeah, it's called Christianity Made Me Talk Like an Idiot.
Yeah. I watched the your talk about that. So this is
it's based on the speech. And I get into the fact that often these types of religions, probably like Hinduism, Islam, so many other superstition-based religions, can cause people who are not dumb to do and say really dumb stuff.
Absolutely.
And the abnormal becomes normal. And so, I get into a lot of the strange stuff that I did as a part of the church that I thought was profound and amazing at the time. And looking back, I'm like, I was just an idiot. Like that just makes no sense. And so it's kind of it's lighthearted, but it's also a targeted expose of the culture and how it often promotes unreason.
Yeah, but so I've got those in my listen list, audiobook listen list. So I'm really looking forward to that because I found your talk extremely entertaining and very relatable as well. But there's one book which I would recommend, not only these, but there's one book especially which I think most Indian listeners will relate to, which is Sacred Cows.
I jumped a little. I just glazed over Hinduism a little bit. In Sacred Cows, not being from that culture, I remain. Even though I felt like I tried to vet all the information, I'm very self-conscious. Like, what did I miss? And you could write an encyclopedia on Hinduism and still not cover remotely everything. You're right. It's so deep, and there's so many branches on that tree. It's crazy.
And we've got some weird stuff. Like I made a presentation to Skeptical, the Californian skeptics, and I was talking about the weirdest COVID quackery that we had in India. And one of them, which I'd saved the best for last, which is, I kid you not, people covering themselves in cow shit and urine and sitting in it, bathed in it, and sitting in the sunshine with it on. And saying that they will absorb vitamin B12 through their skins. Well, you could just take a tablet. Your wife won't run away from you. You can still be hanging around with friends without people going kind of. So just switching gears here a little bit. And this has been something that I've been kind of debating with myself and kind of asking around with a bunch of people. Where do atheists get their morals from? I figured I'd ask you because you have a much more grounded, sensible kind of mind space as far as I can make out, because Matt Dillahunty will just go flying off into philosophy land and I can't understand anything he says after a point. Well, what do you think?
Well, I distill it down to first of all, I find it terrifying that someone would have to be told that murder, theft, rape, etc. are wrong by an outside source. This whole idea that you could not come up with that organically. But how I like to frame it is this. If we look back to our ancestral past, if you killed everybody around you, if you harmed other people, if you tried to go it alone, you were more likely to starve to death or die of the elements or be killed by predators. Cooperation with other animals, with like primates, actually was a way for us to ensure that we would survive and thrive. Pro-social behaviors allowed us also to feel a sense of community. It created a pleasure response in us. And helping other people helped the tribe, and that came back to help us. And so I see us as evolved primates that are the product of behaviors where being pro-social, where creating community, where doing the right thing actually fosters an environment that helps not just other people, but comes back upon us. In that way, I think an evolved ethical system makes a whole lot of sense. And it's a lot more sensible than, some cosmic wizard said, don't kill people. Meanwhile, that cosmic wizard executes millions upon millions of people and then tortures everybody else in hell. It makes no sense to me. But I don't think it's all that hard. I feel like where do your morals come from is actually a jab, isn't it? When a lot of those people say that, some people are genuinely curious, but a lot of times what they're saying is, you heathen, you wicked person, you're less righteous than I am. Where would your morals come from without God? It's almost an insult. That's how I hear it sometimes.
And I was very surprised at actually encountering an Indian, and I assumed from his name that he was Hindu of some sort, that he said that wouldn't all atheists be, just corrupting society and raping and pillaging and killing and having all sorts of violence, just like they do in the West. I was like, what about the West? Like, what are you talking about? They're like, what's happening in the US? I'm like, what is happening in the US? They said, oh, there's so much corruption. Their entire society is going down the drain. I said, you do realize they're still the most powerful country in the world by far. And also, there's most of the crime is carried out actually by, it's statistically proven that most of the crime and most of the residents of most of the prisons are actually Christian. And there's no denying that. And the Scandinavian countries are by far the least religious and have the highest levels of prosperity and the lowest levels of crime recorded on the planet. So how do you relate to that? He's like, no, but isn't that the atheistic position? I said, absolutely not. We're nice people, or most of us. There'll be assholes as well, as I'm sure there are atheist assholes everywhere, and there'll be nice atheists and middle ground atheists who are kind of nice sometimes and assholes other times. We're an entire spectrum of humanity.
You're absolutely one question. There is, the reality that the most secular nations, and when we look at places like New Zealand and Japan, and they are much less warlike. They have much less violent crime. And they are in many ways much more prosperous and even advanced than we are. I wrote a chapter in Christianity Made Me No, I was actually Confessions of a Former Fox News Christian about this notion that Christian Americans like to chest thump that we are number one. We're the greatest. We're the greatest. And so I go metric by metric and say, well, how would you qualify that? Are we the best in terms of cost of living? No. Do we have the least violent crime? No. Is our healthcare system the best? Not remotely. Do we have the biggest army? No, that would be freaking China. We go through wellness, happiness, real estate. I just go point by point, and we fail on almost every metric.
Absolutely.
And in fact, as a religious nation, we're actually one of the more warlike, certainly one of the most warlike first world nations on the planet.
Absolutely.
It's just chaos,
And still one of the most religious countries in the world as well. Yeah. I think probably the nuns are at maybe around 30% or 27%, something like that.
I think we're approaching a quarter. The non-religious, not necessarily atheists, but people who simply don't align with a religious or faith tradition. They may have a God belief or be spiritual, but it doesn't really matter. They're not really engaged. It doesn't. That number is I think it's about 23, 24% or higher, and it's growing all the time. COVID has certainly allowed people a great excuse. They stopped having to get up Sunday mornings because, they canceled church. And then they realized, hey, this is pretty amazing. I get my Sunday mornings back. I don't really need it. And a lot of people never went back, and the churches are having a real panic attack over the loss of membership, et cetera. They're doing whole campaigns. How do we bring people back? And I'm thinking, good luck with that.
Oh, absolutely. And, speaking of religious societies and coming to another thing that I wanted to talk to you about was The Handmaid's Tale, which is a show which I heard about so much on your channel. And there was this one episode, which is like, if you haven't watched Handmaid's Tale, do not listen to this episode. And I skipped that episode and I kept listening to everything else until I finally managed to watch it. And me and my wife were hooked. Like, she finished off, I think season one in one night. Like she just went at it. She watches everything in fast forward. I don't know how she does it, but we finished it, and finally at the end of, I think it was season four, just a couple of days after that, the U.S. forces left Afghanistan, and the Taliban took over, and I was like, oh my God, it's happening in real life. This is exactly what's happening. And
well, we're certainly seeing the war on women in this country, which is, yes, for those who aren't familiar with The Handmaid's Tale, it's based on a Margaret Atwood novel about dystopian theocracy. These fundamentalist religious zealots, men, take over the halls of power and oppress women. They strip them of their humanity. They make them not even secondary citizens in many cases. And then those in a culture where it's very, very, very difficult to have children, they find fertile young women and essentially make them sex slaves. And they bring them in to be impregnated to help further the species. And then they indoctrinate the children. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. But, The Handmaid's Tale was reaching, as a television series on the Hulu network, a massive reach right when we saw the Supreme Court strike down reproductive rights in the United States. So the war on women is a very real thing. A lot of times we're like, oh, come on, it'll never happen. It's just fiction. And then you see the right-wing Christian nationalist, zealot, theocrat, dominionists doing what they do. And you're like, it's possible. It's if things continue, it might even be likely, and it's terrifying.
Absolutely. And it's a horror show it's not a drama show. It's a horror show. And
it really is
infuriating and scary as hell, because even in India, we fortunately don't have similar ideologies, at least associated with our religions, maybe a little bit with Islam, but we've still got an extremely loud fundamentalist clan, the Hindutva clan, as at least a school of thought. I can't even call it a school of thought. It's very thoughtless because they think that Hinduism is a very conservative religion, and that wearing jeans and eating chow mein and going out late at night, women going out late at night and just asking to be raped. So rape victims just go, they get ignored a lot of the time because they were asking for it, because they were wearing dresses and they were wearing all sorts of revealing outfits. I'm like, women in saris and in burqas and, hijabs, they get raped too. It's not like it doesn't happen. It happens all the time. And these Western ideologies that have been coming in, like modern medicine and, just modern culture and drinking, et cetera, a lot of these fundamentalist Indian politicians, and especially because now we have a very strong in the central government, which is now very fundamentalist Hindu and very nationalist Hindu. So it's very much like the MAGA crowd in the US. And they're trying to enforce this, not only a very strong sense of Indian culture being corrupted by the West, but also kind of dividing the Hindus with the Muslims. We've always had a kind of division between the Hindus and the Muslims. That's why Pakistan got formed. That's why Bangladesh got formed during partition. But now they're driving a wedge even deeper between the two cultures and trying to, and they're totally happy with it, because they're like, first of all, they have the Hindu majority country. So they'll get voted in again and again and again, and they can do whatever they want. So with every term that the prime minister is serving, he's getting even more, not him, he never says anything politically incorrect on the camera, but all his cronies are managing to do all these weird things and kind of getting deeper and deeper into the weeds of doing, separating our country and kind of really driving in very deep wedges of separation, which is absolutely horrendous. Like it's horrible, and it's very much like a dictatorship in many ways. Like media is being silenced. There have been people who have been taken off, banned on Twitter, banned on many social media, because they're speaking out against them. And my family keeps telling me that I shouldn't mess around with these guys. And now that I started talking about atheism, there's a chance that I'll be targeted as well at some point of time. But so far, so good. The atheist YouTubers and podcasters are so far safe. But I think you even had, did you have Sanal Edamaraku on your podcast at some point of time? He got not exiled, but he had to take asylum in Finland because he got thrown.
We may have done a feature on that. Forgive me, I've done 650 shows and they're all blurring together at the moment. But yeah, it's very possible that we featured that.
Yeah, because he apparently, I could be wrong about this. So if there's anybody who's watching who knows that I'm wrong, please let me know in the comments. But there was a statue of Mary that was crying what seemed like blood, and somewhere in the south of India. And everybody was, absolutely aghast, and all the people were congregating and they were touching the blood and kissing her feet, and it was flowing all the way down her. And when there was an investigation, though, they found that there was a sewer line which had broken behind the statue, and the rusty, dirty water was kind of seeping through the plaster of Paris in the statue and coming out at the thinnest point, which was the inner sides of her eyes, and then dripping down her body. And I was like, it's horrible. But when he debunked that, and when he exposed it and said that you need to clean this up, this is disgusting, he got death threats. And now he's had to take asylum in a totally different country. So we're kind of in the same boat in some ways, I have to say. It's very unfortunate.
People who take a belief personally and then are confronted with the reality that it doesn't make any sense. It's like you've insulted one of their children. They it's I always like to use the example of Mother Teresa. Everybody's like, well, lovely, Mother Teresa. But when you dive into the reality of who she was, very troubled person who celebrated poverty and said God takes pleasure in the suffering of those who are, going through tremendous difficulty. And meanwhile, she was a total hypocrite, jet setting with junk bond millionaires. And, and if you talk about any of that stuff, people lose their minds. Why would you ever say she's Mother Teresa? And so my test for them is, okay, fine. You tell me 3 things about Mother Teresa that that have nothing to do with the fact that she's Catholic or where she was born. All right. Tell me anything specific about Mother Teresa? No one knows a thing, but they still have an emotional reaction. They still freak out and double down because they fell in love with the idea of Mother Teresa. They cherish it. They protect it. And people do. Yeah. Oh, yeah. And the miracle, the quote unquote miracle of her sainthood was totally manufactured. There are tons of ink has been spilled on that debacle. But, I think this is often true when it comes to anything like that, whether it's a religious belief or political belief. People protect it, and they're more interested in protecting it and keeping it safe and insulated than ever exposing it to the, to light or heat. And that's a challenge for those of us out there, including ourselves, when we look at ourselves, and do I believe it because it's true or do I just have a belief in belief? That kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I know you have places to go, people to meet. So I just wanted to end on one last question. Mm-hmm. What has been, you've had a lot of shows, you've interviewed a lot of people, you've talked on a huge variety of topics over 600 episodes now on your podcast and many, many appearances as a speaker. So what has been your finest moment or your most cherished moment as an atheist activist over a decade now?
Boy, that answer would change depending on what time of day you ask me.
That's a good way to be.
I'm going to cheat. I'm going to just throw a few out.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the opportunity to be a part of the conversation, to be able to present from the stage and have an audience respond to the material is hugely gratifying. I'm struck by the people that I've been able to meet. I'm interviewing Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller. Oh my God, it's Penn Jillette. I'm about to interview primatologist Frans de Waal. He is one of the, if not the most famous primatologist on the planet, who has done massive, massive work. I got to meet John Delancey and interview him a couple of times. He played Q plays Q on Star Trek. And then everyday people who they're just so freaking generous. A quick anecdote. This would be a good way to maybe cap it. My relationship with my mother and father, very troubled, because they believe that I am spiritually sick. And so it's really affected. It had affected our relationship, and they would cross boundaries all the time. They would send me messages and sermons and hell threats and all this other stuff. They just wouldn't leave it alone. And I, at some point, drew a line, and for a couple of years, we didn't speak. I'm like, if you continue to do this, I'm going to have to enforce this boundary, because you're not allowed. I do not give you permission. And they would not abide that boundary, and I drew the line. So I was giving a speech in a little town called Wichita, Kansas. And during the Q&A, someone asked me about my relationship with my parents. I was like, it's pretty bad. They're pretty ashamed. And when I was out in the lobby afterwards, a lovely woman named Brenda came up. And she looked me in the eyes and she said, I just want you to know that if I was your mother, I would be very, very proud of you.
Oh, wow.
And I started weeping. Like I just was the eyes. I just started crying, and I gave her a big hug, and it took me a while to compose myself. I guess I hadn't realized how much I was looking for that in my life. That's the nature of the people that I've been able to run into. There's so much goodwill and there's so much goodness. And it's the kind of thing that I wish a lot of really fundamentally religious people could see. I wish they could see, the connection, the human connection, and hear the stories and see the smiles and get the hugs and feel that sense of connection beyond superstition, but in a more meaningful way, which is simply human. And having that kind of family all over the world. I've got family all over the world. I'm struck by it. I'm honored by it. I will never take it for granted. That is probably the single best part of being a privilege to do what I do, is my connection. People have taken me into their family and I've taken them into mine. We are part of the human experience together. And that's been, I know it sounds like a greeting card over the holidays when I say it that way, but I really do mean it. It's just lovely. It's just a lovely, lovely and amazing thing to have in my life. So that would be number one.
That is so amazing. Thank you so much. Seth, it has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for being on here. It has been something that I've been looking forward to for a very long time. If you scroll up on the Facebook messages, you'll see that I messaged you back in 2018, hoping that you'd turn up at CSICon, or if I could have met you somewhere outside. And before that, I met Adam Reeks in Australia, and he said he'd met you. So yeah, we had a great time. We had over a
mutual point of contact. Well, I hope I get a chance to shake your hand in person someday. I hope I didn't talk too much. When you invite a radio host on your show, get ready for a verbose,
I was counting on it.
long-winded, bloviating guy, But no, it's been a real honor, and I appreciate the invitation very much.
No, it's been our pleasure completely. Thank you so much for joining us. And for everyone who's watching and listening, thank you so much for joining me for this very special interview. It's definitely a landmark in my career for sure. And please like this if you did. Subscribe to my channel. Please go to the Thinking Atheist channel and subscribe to Seth. And I will put all the links down below, including for all the books that Seth has written. They will be affiliate links, because you'll be helping me out, and by buying the book, you'll be helping him out. So thank you all very much for watching. See you next time. Until then, be rationable. See ya.